Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Doom Patrol Season 2, Episode 9. It is called Wax Patrol, and it's kind of the season finale, at least not by choice, but just in
But
the
it
fact,
is.
but in the effect that it got a thing. And they got lucky, I will say, but it definitely felt more of a mid-season finale than a season finale.
I agree. It's enough that, given the circumstances, I'll accept that, okay, it's a very cliffhangery season finale, but in the original specs, this was clearly a mid-season point.
Yeah, this was clearly this, and then obviously there'd have been six after this that would have been the kind of the payoff to it all. It does so it's a satisfying cliffhanger in the sense that it feels like a proper cliffhanger that we can sort of chew on for a bit. However, it does mean that we have to get more at some point, or
If we don't, I'm going to be furious at.
yes,
Let's be honest, I'm going to be furious at HBO Max because it's their responsibility now.
yeah, it's gonna be furious. I'll be furious at everyone. They're all gonna get my wrath. But Wax Patrol. So full spoilers, of course, for the episode. If I didn't mention that already. The other thing I will say is the episode's only 46 minutes long, which is a bit on par from the previous episodes. There's actually episodes earlier in the season which are longer than this. So if this has anything from episode 10 that they said they were going to put into episode 9, it was less than like single digits of minutes.
What's interesting is almost every episode is into the 50 minutes before this one. Most of them are like 52, 54.
No, where are they? So it's even weirder than that.
So this is actively shorter. And they did say they were using content from episode 10. I wonder if they cut some other subplots that were maybe leading into other things into the next episode, that knowing that they're not going to have that episode, they're just like, just take it out.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the case, if they cut stuff as well in order to make room for episode 10 stuff, I would maybe guess then that all of the Miranda James stuff might have actually been episode 10 originally.
Yeah, quite possibly. And I could have seen maybe originally we did a little bit more with the cyborg stuff, for example, in this episode. And then they were like, well, that doesn't actually have a place to conclude right now, so let's just take it out.
Yeah. Because that said, though, I do think it oddly worked having the Miranda Jane stuff. And again, I'm just assuming that was taken from 10. Because at the end of the episode, I thought nothing feels like it was tacked on. Like, the only reason why I'm suspecting that is because you're saying that they removed other things and took stuff from 10. So in that case, it could be that whole subplot. Because as it is, I thought that was far too much time. There's no way that was all from 10. But if they removed other stuff, then maybe it is.
Yeah.
But what I think is really smart about that is that when it got to the end of that subplot, I had this kind of smart realization, not smart on my part, smart on the show's part, I want to be that clear, that seemingly, I think that this Who is Miranda right now is kind of connecting to what's going on with everyone else in the episode. It's just it happened with Jane first, and that is because the whole thing in the episode is that the Candlemaker makes all of their old imaginary friends come back. So, and then the reveal in in the underground is that seemingly this Miranda is actually Kay's father. I'm wondering if the Candlemaker, this Miranda. When did this Miranda get created? Was it after the Candlemaker went in there? I think it was.
No, I don't think so.
Are you sure?
Not 100%, but I don't think, because I'm picturing in my again, distorted memory. Memory is a funny thing. I'm picturing the Candlemaker going on the rampage and killing, or seemingly killing two of them, and them looking to Miranda for guidance after that.
I don't remember Miranda appearing till after that, because I think doesn't she come out the well when they
when they go to dump the bodies?
No, because she's the one that convinces them to go and dump the bodies.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
But I don't remember her being there before any of that either. Because it's because it was a shock when she came back. She wasn't around from the start of the season. It was kind of a big deal that she showed up at some point.
She appeared at some point. I agree. I have to check.
Because I mean, even if it was before, which makes it a bit weirder, admittedly, but the impression I was getting from this episode was that this was just, not Jane specifically, I guess, but, Kay as a whole, her, evil imaginary friend, the demon that's been haunting her whole life has been her father, and that's kind of what Miranda is in this. Is if the reason why Miranda might have been the primary in the first place is because she was the first that was created, right? Possibly.
Very possible.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say outright likely, given
Yeah.
when we've seen Miranda in the timeline.
And what are all these personalities, if not, in a way, not exactly the same, but in a way, imaginary friends?
Oh no, they absolutely are,
Yeah.
and that's why we've been linking Jane with Dorothy, all season in terms of their power set.
So, I mean, maybe there's some details to fudge out here, but my impression at the end of this episode is that that's what this is. It's the manifestation in the underground of her imaginary friend, but combined with her father.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily definitively that. If they tell me it's something else, then sure. But thematically and functionally, it seems to line up in a way that would be very satisfying.
Because that's what made it feel like all this stuff with Jane worked with the rest of the episode. Because otherwise, unless they intentionally want us to think of that and then swerve us later, then it's okay, I suppose. But it has to, at least thematically, as you're watching the episode, kind of make some kind of link to it.
You would assume, yeah.
Because otherwise, the Miranda Jane stuff would just feel so disconnected to everything else. Not that you can't have disconnected side plots, but this episode made a point at the start of saying, hey, everyone's been doing their own thing all season. This is them becoming a Doom Patrol to go deal with something, much to Cliff's dismay, because Cliff's off to his daughter's wedding and he's all upset.
Him having to make that phone call to the answering machine, he is not happy.
Yeah. I mean, as much as Miranda's evil and all that, she does have a point that if they don't save the world, then there can be no wedding, or at the very least, maybe it'll survive enough for the wedding, but there'll be no happy marriage afterwards because the world's going to end.
I agree, and Miranda actually is not very evil, in that same way. For a few points in this, where the others drag her back underground and be like, what are you doing? You're putting us in danger. This is all Jane's nonsense. You're not supposed to be doing that. That's kind of why we elected you primary again.
Mm-hmm.
And she's you. But she makes a point of kind of, well, we got to move forward. And by the end, you could see it as evil. But in the moment, it kind of works as, oh, no, maybe this is a home for Kay in general.
But again, this actually links up to if this is actually from the Candlemaker. And given that every other imaginary friend in this basically gets all the characters to the point where they can be taken over / killed by the Candlemaker, it makes sense that Miranda's goal is to lure them all there and achieve all this.
It absolutely does, yeah.
And maybe the Candlemaker can't take, the body of Kay until all the personalities have one by one been taken care of, which is, because she has been basically serial killing them one by one.
Yeah.
Like we end with Kay confronting her and sort of like, addressing who it is, but before that, we have Jane in the well finding the body, but obviously she's sort of just floating as we get flashbacks of what, basically how Miranda's time as the primary ended and how Jane was created, which starts off as this kind of sweet story, set in the time of free love,
late 60s.
Yeah, late 60s, early 70s maybe, and you have Miranda being asked out by this busker, and it seems kind of sweet and whatever. They move in together. Also seems kind of sweet. There's the one moment where he sort of goes to brush her hair outside, and she gets a little uncomfortable with the touching, understandably. But then
this is like in their very first meeting, though, and he immediately backs off. He's like, "Sorry, we'll take it slow." And it was an innocent touch in the time as well.
And it cuts ahead. They're moving, and it seems like they're at a point there where they're more comfortable with each other. She's more comfortable, but then he the sort of the final big flashback is he's throwing this party for his work friends, and it seems fine enough at first. And Miranda kind of chuckles a little bit because there's like 3 people kind of kissing each other in the corners. Oh, that's kind of wild. Whatever,
Yeah.
Me cast a suitcase or whatever. But then this work friend of her boyfriend tries to kiss her, and she goes over to tell him, and he's like, basically shrugs it off, and then she looks around and notices that everyone's starting to like go to downtown,
and then she's like, "Did you volunteer our home for a swingers party?"
And I mean, you're making light of it, but it's actually kind of a dark moment because it's very much. He, without telling her, he's put her in a position where everyone is there for sexual encounters, and for casual sexual encounters, which, given her past, is not something she's going to be readily just able to jump into. There ain't nothing wrong with swinging or orgies or whatever, but everyone going needs to know what they're going into and has to be aware of it. This is thrust upon her, and she feels so uncomfortable, and she's so willing. And he's a bit of a dick here because he completely threatens to break up with her. He's like, "Well, if you're not into this, then I guess this was a mistake, and I'll just leave." So he kind of manipulates her into it, And she goes, so we get this really, really awkward scene of this guy having sex with her and her just being mortified the entire time. The whole thing is really uncomfortable. It's kind of, and it makes sense why the underground kind of rebels against Miranda, because of they put Kay in this position.
And they're like, no, you're supposed to keep us safe, and this is the worst possible scenario, essentially, for Kay.
And it's credit to the performance here, because when after the underground scene and she woke back up, though, as soon as she started talking, I knew it was Jane. Like, before she even said anything specific, the demeanor and the way she said her first sentence, I'm like, that's Jane. It's Jane now.
I mean, I think we haven't really mentioned her acting this season, because I think we probably did it a lot of the first season. But she's been fantastic at swapping between personalities that are, drastically different.
I think what I appreciate about this, though, is that there was no obvious tell, and like there was no visual effect. There was no like she's got different clothes on now. I mean, she wasn't wearing any clothes. She was just
right. But sometimes they do that, like a shimmer effect.
Yeah,
I recall.
And sometimes it's just really obvious because they'll make her up differently. This was just raw, the performance. It was one line of dialogue, and it was just a simple line. It wasn't, obviously once she started speaking, into her speech, it was more obvious then just by like what she was saying. But from the very first line, it could have been anyone saying it. I knew it was Jane because of how it was delivered. So I really want to, commend that.
I have to admit, there was a point during the scene I was terrified for everyone there.
Oh yeah.
It was as Miranda was going away, and as Jane came out, she opens her eyes, and it's clear there's immediately a shift, right?
Mm.
Even before she says a thing, but she hadn't said anything yet, so I hadn't gone straight to Jane. I was like, oh God, who is this? Is she going to kill them all?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, Jane could have done, but I guess Jane was safer than some of the others.
Yeah, and Jane, of course, I mean, I would maybe even suggest this is the creation of Jane.
I think it almost certainly is, yeah.
So, and Jane finds the body of the real Miranda in the well. She is down there still. That's not Miranda who's up there. And, that's kind of the big cliffhanger for that side of the plot. But leading to my speculation that this is the imaginary friend, or whatever warped version of it would happen inside the railway, or the underground, I should say, from the Candlemaker. So, and that ties it so nicely into everything else that it just makes sense. It makes sense that that's what this is. And if Miranda did appear after the Candlemaker appeared, because it might have been the very next episode, it might have been while they were deciding what to do with those bodies. It might have been then. I mean, I can't remember for sure, but it seems plausible. The timeline seems like it might have been there.
Yeah. Again, I'd have to check, but yeah.
So. Which would just further cement the idea that no, Candlemaker is why this is happening. This is why she exists here in this form.
Yeah.
So.
Really strong stuff linking it in, though.
Yeah.
Because, like I say, for a lot of the episode, it feels very disconnected. Like, really engrossing and enthralling to watch, and it's, horrifying at points, but emotionally, really driven. Like this show can really dig its nails into. Yeah. But it feels disconnected for a long time until the last couple of minutes of it, and it kind of makes sense.
And the rest of the Doom Patrol go to the fairground, obviously. They find Willoughby. There's some fun banter around here. Cliff has a couple of really good what the Fs, as he does.
I think my favourite part of this particular, this not the best what the F of the episode, but my favourite bit here is where he says it, and Larry just goes, "For once I'm with Cliff. What the F?"
So. Yeah, and they see these people have all been like turned to wax or coated in wax or however it is they're dying, which ultimately ends up happening to all of them. They all meet their imaginary friends, with the exception, of course, of Larry, who doesn't have one. He never had an imaginary friend, so he actually just kind of he gets taken out really quickly because of that, because there's no lead up to it. He can just get to him immediately. Rita has one that she made a person out of cutouts, which by the way, creepy. So it's actually moving in 2D as if it's this cutout bit of paper.
It's an impressive looking thing in a very creepy way.
Yeah. And it turns out she's pissed that Rita left her behind, but Rita's like, well, I literally used an image of my mother's eyes for you, and after what my mother did, it was kind of hard to look at you the same way again. So that was the end of your tenure as my imaginary friend. But ultimately, Rhea gets covered in wax. Cyborg's got Dr. Cowboy, which is his dad. It looks like his dad. It's the actor who plays his dad.
Yeah.
As a cowboy, but instead of guns in his holsters, he's got beakers. Do you know what I liked about how this was played? Is that ultimately it turns out that Dr. Cowboy isn't there to sort of give him proper advice or critique him or anything. He's just there to agree with whatever Cyborg said.
idealized version of his dad, basically.
Yeah. But what's beautiful about it is that it still actually gets this dramatic beat across for Vic, because Vic realizing that this thing will not disagree with them is actually what makes him realize that he does have a problem with what he's saying. Because he talks about, well, I'll let Ronnie go because maybe the bad guys have it coming and maybe I shouldn't stop her. And he's trying to convince himself, and it's because this thing that, that this imaginary friend that won't dispute him agrees with him, that he clearly sees on his face that, no, I do disagree with this. I made the wrong choice, right? You know, so I was really smart in that sense. I like that.
Yeah, it was really good.
But then, of course, he gets waxed.
Yep,
as it were.
And then you have, well, I think it's safe to say the best and funniest imaginary friend of them all, right?
Definitely funniest, and that is the imaginary version of Jesus, which Cliff had because he was at Bible camp for a few months one summer.
Yep.
And this Jesus is dropping F-bombs, he's kicking Cliff through things, he's ripping off arms. I mean, hell, when Cliff eventually turns to wax, he's actually like completely ripped apart. His head's on, he's been Iron Giant, basically. His head's just lying there on the on the ground. We don't see Chief like all episode up until the end, because we occasionally cut to Dorothy, who's just kind of like sitting there cowering in one of the arcade places, hearing the voice and hoping that they'll the friends will come and save her. And the big ending, and I was kind of thinking that maybe they were going to do like a really cool thing here where, like, and this is me hoping that it's going to have more of an ending, I suppose, is that Dorothy was going to be able to fight the Candlemaker because it was connected to her.
There was a point about when I kind of checked the time.
Yeah.
It was about 10 minutes from the end. And I was like, oh, this is a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I just I got to that point. I was like, I know.
I never checked the time, but it was because. It was this because, by the way, I love the music. See this whole scene with her and Niles and the mum showing up, like all that stuff. Like the music playing as Dorothy's making this choice where she's basically saying, "No, I have to be grown up. I can't do this as a little girl." And it kind of feels like, as much as it feels like she's doing what her mum wants and what the Candlemaker wants, it kind of feels like the implication here is that she's making a choice to try and fight it. It's just she can't fight it in any other way. She has to kind of go along with it for now. The idea that being a grown up isn't, getting your first period, it isn't, trying grown up things. It's like standing for something because you believe in it, and that's what being a grown up is, and that's ultimately what she's going to do, and that's going to be her arc, and that's going to be beautiful and glorious.
It's kind of ultimately maybe Niles should have just believed in her and helped her fight and accept that she's going to be an adult rather than try and stop that forever. Which
in a lot of ways is his problem with every character, is that he doesn't trust them and just does what he thinks is right.
That is his fatal flaw, right?
Yeah. So, but no, the music is she was making this choice, and she was like, "No, I'll make my own weapon," and she makes this ridiculous like hammer
staff thing.
Yeah, it's got like a hammer on the back and a spear on the front. It's a whole thing.
It's cool as shit. I want one.
But then the Candlemaker rises from the flames and grabs her, and that's the pulls her into the fire, and that's the ending. So I suspect that we're going to get a really uplifting ending to this, where Dorothy is able to like sort of like fight her demons and sort of save the world essentially on her own, proving Niles wrong the entire time. In the best possible way. It'll be glorious. But
yeah, and I think that's why, as disappointed as I am that this is the end of the season, naturally, because who wouldn't want more? As long as this gets another season, this is it's about as good as we could have ever asked for in this scenario, as a cliffhanger ending, which other shows have had cliffhanger seasons, and it's always a little bit frustrating when you don't know if it's getting renewed or not. But in the long run, if they do get renewed, it can work out fine. And I think this one does. If it, as long as it gets renewed, will be one of those that'll be absolutely fine.
Do you think if this just went as it was supposed to, do you think next episode would have had no Doom Patrol in it? Like the main 4 that have all been waxed? Do you think it would have been the Jane stuff, Miranda, and maybe some Dorothy stuff or Niles stuff instead? And sort of, because technically speaking, most of the Doom Patrol characters are quote unquote dead right now.
This show isn't afraid to take risks. I think that is I think there's no reason why it wouldn't. In fact, that could be the first episode back still.
Yeah. Alternatively, I could see them like having some sort of like weird afterlife world where they're all hanging out and like figuring out what's happened to them. Like,
or that would again not be out of place on this show.
Yeah, it would work. It would make sense on Doom Patrol. And
I'd say weirder things have happened. I'm not sure if they actually have, but that is no. It's not a huge stretch weirder than anything else in this show, so, Yeah.
No, I mean, it's worth saying that I love the episode, and I think it works really well as its own episode. And it even works as a mid-season finale. Not that these seasons are supposed to have breaks, but we've been given one, and this kind of works as a mid-season finale. So,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I expect whatever we get next, as long as it's renewed, and it should be, the better be, and I'll be mad if it doesn't. But assuming it does, like, I do expect the next thing we watch from this will be called Season 3, Episode 1, and that's okay, alright? But, and
like I said, I think the writers did a wonderful job with a thankless task, right?
Yeah.
No one wants to be in that situation of having shot 10 episodes of a 15-episode season and then being told, or not even 10 full episodes, 9 3/4 of a 15-episode season, and then being told, oh, by the way, that's all you've got, and make this work. I think they did a bloody good job of pulling out what they did.
I wonder if there's anything from this one or what they shot at 10 that we've not seen yet. And again, assuming there's stuff that was cut out from the original version of 9, I wonder if there's any of that they'll scrap because of how they'll rewrite like where they're going next a little bit.
Probably, I would.
Yeah. I'm just curious,
and not in a bad way. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with.
No, just because they had to change certain things, so now some of that stuff is a bit redundant. Or
yeah, some of the pacing. Okay, now instead of being in the back end of a season, it's actually going to be in the front end. You might want to redo some stuff for pacing reasons.
Yeah. So they might massage some various like ideas they were already going with a bit. It's one of these weird things where I don't know if I should feel confident that HBO Max / DC Universe. It is probably more Max than it is DC Universe.
Yeah, we were just saying before we recorded this that like Titans and Harley Quinn have changed all their official like Facebook pages from DC Universe's Titans to just DC's Titans, which is...
yeah, but what I was saying is that I don't know if it's a sign of confidence or not that them saying, no, we're definitely putting this out now. Like, I don't know if that's like because if I was a network, I'd be a little bit worried that they just want to shout out the episodes they've got and not really care. Now, admittedly, we have a bit of context here where HBO Max just maybe wanted content because they just launched. So, no, we need some content. We need content, damn it.
They're a bit desperate, yeah.
And they're confident that they're going to have more, so they're not like worried about any backlash of what this season's ending currently is or anything like that. But there's that little gremlin in the back of my mind where it's like, what if it's just like, well, we don't plan to continue, just shout out what we've got because we're never going back. We're never going to let them finish it.
It's very possible. We do not know what HBO Max are like yet in terms of this sort of stuff. We don't have any sort of track record to compare against.
Now, it is worth mentioning, we do have like a online DC like con of sorts this in a couple of weekends time where they're going to be announcing a lot of stuff, revealing trailers for movies and stuff, so it's entirely possible that a season 3 like confirmation will come before the end of the month.
I believe it's even being hosted and kind of run through HBO Max. DC Fandom is what it's called.
I think there's a very good chance that they will announce a season 3 of this and then season 1s of a couple of the other things they've been developing.
Yeah, they'll be like, okay, I would suspect maybe a renewal for Harley Quinn, and that's moving over. I would suspect, given the Facebook name change, that okay, Titans season 3 will actually be on HBO Max now. Yeah. Maybe exclusively. I don't know.
It's not a renewal because it was already renewed before, but yeah, like just
in that slate of announcements, I would not be surprised at all to kind of see all that.
Maybe Adam Strange or Green Lantern or any of these other ones that they've been working on might even get something.
A trailer or a date or something, yeah. I don't know what.
Well, no, I don't think they've shot any of these things, but I just mean like an official, like, because they've not ordered any of these things yet. I don't think.
I think they ordered the Green Lantern one.
Did they order the Green Lantern one?
I thought they did, but I could be wrong.
I thought they were still on the working on it, the developing it stage. But,
okay, maybe.
I mean, but maybe they'll give us a logo and say coming 2021, hopefully. Hopefully.
Filming situations permitted.
What I think is really funny right now is that right now in New Zealand they're shooting Avatar 4. There's so many things it can't shoot right now, but one of the few things that is shooting right now, actively shooting,
I guess
rolling
they have
cameras.
pre-existing permits for New Zealand.
Yeah, they were already shooting in New Zealand anyway, so they're
that's fine for them then.
They're happy days.
I mean, everyone else wants to get there.
Do you know what I think is so funny about it is that, like, I know because everyone's really cynical when it comes to Avatar and whatever. I'm not really going to debate it. But I think what's funny is that they've already finished shooting pretty much 2 and 3, and they're like in the middle of shooting 4, which guarantees that even if 2 bombs, that 3 and 4 are still going to be existing because they're going to have shot them all. The only one that might not happen now is 5.
Let's be honest though, because they pushed all of Avatar, not because of delays for this reason, but more just the whole slate of everything got pushed, right?
Oh yeah, they'll probably do 5 now. Yeah, actually,
Yeah, because they've got an extra year. I mean, two's not even coming out till 2020.
That said,
now,
though, there's a reason why they didn't shoot 5 right after 4, or they're not going to shoot it right after 4. Apparently, the scuttlebutt is it was one of the actors that's a kid. They want to have age up naturally before they shoot 5 by a few years. But I mean, given that there's going to be this one every year and it's 4 movies, is it they'll have time to shoot 5.
Were they not doing it every other year to release them?
That's what I said, didn't it?
You said every year.
Oh, not every other year because they're alternating with Star Wars now.
Yeah, and I think they're starting in 22.
Which
now.
again was, I mean, it's really funny to make fun of all the delays to Avatar, but that again was a decision that was more about them wanting to alternate between the franchises than it was because Avatar's not ready for 2021.
Literally every movie on the planet has been delayed.
Yes.
Yeah, right now. It's just funnier with Avatar.
Yes.
It's like it's funny with New Mutants.
Don't compare Avatar to New Mutants. It is not the same thing, you know. James
There's
Cameron.
one I'm more interested in seeing.
James Cameron being like a complete nutcase auteur who wants to fine tune everything for a decade is not the same thing as the New Mutants, which keeps getting shoved.
But I'm more interested in watching.
New Mutants was completed like 3 years ago at this point.
Hey, no, they had reshoots to do.
They didn't do them. They never happened.
Well, that's true. They didn't. Did they?
They never have. Right. There's been no reshooting.
No, that's true.
The kid from Game of Thrones started off looking like a kid and is now like 40 with 2 kids of her own.
Harsh but true.
Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent there at the Doom Patrol discussion.
This was technically Doom Patrol.
Yeah, it was a really solid episode. A lot of stuff in there that I really liked. Even Willoughby's little joke about his imaginary friend being this old,
Punch and Judy puppet.
And he's like, hey, I grew up in the 15th century, all right? We didn't have Bugs Bunny.
Bugs effing Bunny, I think it was.
Which is just funny, because, I mean, obviously to anyone today, that's an old thing. That's what you'd use to say, hey, you're old, because you grew up with Bugs Bunny. But hey, that's what it is. Obviously, great per usual. Obviously, we cannot wait for more. And you know what? I do feel a bit optimistic now that I've realised that they're doing a lot of DC announcements in a couple of weeks' time. That it's specifically on HBO Max means that, hey, if there's a place where they're going to say we're definitely doing more of this, that's the time.
They're probably saving announcements like that just for that big blowout rather than sprinkling them now.
Yeah, they got a couple of movie announcements, they got a couple of TV announcements. We're expecting some comic announcements because we're expecting a lot of new comic stuff at the start of the year.
They also said video games, so we might finally get that.
Yeah, okay. All right. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But I mean, it's a wide-ranging thing that they're doing.
Until I get my Doom Patrol game of like hunting down rats as miniature Cliff, I'm not happy. I want to punch giant rats.
Do you play as the beard hunter?
No. Don't be mad. Also, a Sex-Men game, or a Sex-Men's level in the Doom Patrol game would work well, I think.
It's ripe for adaptation.
Yes, there's just so many different chapters in the game you could have. But that is our Doom Patrol kind of finale review. So thank you very much for joining us. And please do liking's the super free and easy way to support everything we do. If you do like our content and you want to see more of it and want to make sure it keeps coming, you can also support us financially over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. Otherwise, get us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates. And if you are interested in DC Comics and the characters and all that stuff, check out Comics for the Multiverse, our DC Comics podcast that we do every week. Both of us plus Matt working through all the new DC books. There was a Doom Patrol series recently, but when it started, none of us were that well versed in it. I can guarantee you that if there's any new Doom Patrol books that start in the future, we'll definitely be looking at them. So,
definitely, yeah.
But none right now, unfortunately. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?